My dears, have you ever felt like your life has hit a dead end? Look at me now, a 7-8-year-old woman sitting here leisurely sipping tea. But few people know that I once stood on the borderline between life and death on that very Christmas Eve. I was 10 years old that year. The rain was pouring down, and my mother and I were thrown out onto the street in the literal sense, penniless, homeless, and abandoned by my own biological father. In utter desperation, my mother did something crazy. She knocked on the door of the mansion belonging to a man the whole town called the Dead Heart, a wealthy but terrifying widower who hadn't spoken to a soul for 3 years. Everyone thought he would drive us away, or worse. But what happened behind that rusty iron gate didn't just save our lives. It was a powerful testament that sometimes God sends storms not to drown you, but to wash clean the path that leads you to where you truly belong. If you are listening from anywhere in the world, please leave a comment and subscribe, because there are truths that need to be spread, even if they might shake your beliefs. There are stories that, no matter how painful, still must be told. My mother, Sarah, worked on the ranch of Mr. Donald, a greedy and cruel man who exploited his workers without mercy. We lived in a small shack at the back of the property. Me, Mama, my brother Caleb, and my little sister Molly, who was still very tiny. Mama had been abandoned by my father 2 years earlier. He simply left one day, saying he was going to look for work in the big city, and never came back. He left Mama alone, with 3 mouths to feed, without a cent, without explanation. The pain of rejection marked her face with a sadness she tried to hide from us, but that I saw every night when she thought we were asleep. Back then, I was a lively, curious girl who loved to read. On the few times we went to the town, I would stare at the school library, dreaming of being able to read all those books. I had a hunger for words that seemed endless. But on Mr. Donald's ranch, there was no room for dreams, only hard work from dawn until nightfall, and debts that never decreased. I remember our little shack smelled of lye soap and pine that Mama hung on the door to scare away mosquitoes. The floor was packed earth, red like the Missouri clay, and it creaked when we walked barefoot in the morning. At night, we heard the chirping of crickets mixed with the distant sound of a banjo from some tired worker trying to forget the hardness of life with music. On the neighboring farm, a few miles away, lived the farmer Robert. People in the region said he had been generous and cheerful before losing his wife, Mrs. Margaret, and his small child in a typhoid epidemic about 3 years earlier. They said his big house, which used to be full of parties and music, was now silent as an abandoned cemetery, that he lived locked in his office, speaking to no one, dead inside. I had never seen Robert in person, but I heard the stories the workers told when they gathered under the old oak tree at the end of the day. They said he had become another man after the tragedy, that he didn't laugh anymore, didn't receive visitors, didn't go to church, that the only thing he did was work the land as if he wanted to bury himself in it. But everything changed on that rainy Christmas Eve. The foreman of the ranch where we worked, Frank, was a short, fat man with a thin mustache and small eyes that shone with malice when someone crossed him. He charged absurd prices for the shack where we lived, deducted from Mama's wages for any invented reason, a broken plate, a chicken that escaped the coop, a day it rained too much to work in the fields. At the end of the month, she always owed more than she earned. It was a trap with no exit, like those rabbit holes that go too deep for us to dig out. That afternoon, Mama discovered that Frank was stealing sacks of corn from Mr. Donald and selling them on the side, noting them in the books as losses due to rain or pests. She saw the papers by chance when she went to deliver some messages to his office. Mama knew how to read and write well, a rare thing among working women of that time, and she recognized the wrong numbers right away. Mama was an honest woman, made of steel. Even after being abandoned and humiliated by her own husband, she didn't lose her dignity. She always wore her hair in a tight bun, her skirt always clean, even if patched, and walked with her head held high, even when the world seemed to want to push her down. She couldn't stay silent in the face of injustice. She went straight to tell Frank that she had seen everything, and that if he didn't stop, she would tell Mr. Donald. It was the biggest mistake of her life. Frank turned red with rage, the veins in his neck bulging like thick rope. He said she was meddlesome, that she didn't know who she was messing with, that an abandoned woman should stay quiet in her corner and be thankful for having a roof over her head. He threw in her face that no one would believe the word of a woman left by her husband against his, that Mr. Donald was his childhood friend and would never side with just any worker. You think you're better than the others because you can read? He spat the words with contempt. Well, know that a single woman is worth nothing in this world. Your husband already knew that when he left you. I saw Mama turn pale, but she didn't lower her eyes. That same night, when the sky was already heavy and purple with storm clouds, Frank appeared in our little room with 2 goons, big men with thick hands who stood in the doorway as if they were guarding a jail. "Half an hour," he said, lighting a cigarette and blowing the smoke in Mama's direction. "You have half an hour to gather your junk and disappear from here. And if I see you near the ranch again, you'll regret it for the rest of your lives." It is heartbreaking to witness such cruelty, isn't it? Frank thought he was destroying them, but he didn't realize that by pushing Sarah out the door, he was actually pushing her toward her destiny. Keep listening, because their walk through the storm is about to lead them to a door they never expected to find. Looking back now, you might wonder why Mama didn't fight back, why she didn't run to Mr. Donald. But you have to understand, my dears, in those days, on a ranch like that, the foreman was the law. A woman's word against a man's power was a battle lost before it even began. And Mama knew the only victory that night was keeping us alive. It started to rain at that exact moment. It wasn't that gentle late afternoon rain. It was a thick, violent rain that drummed on the tin roof as if the sky were dumping stones on us. The cold wind entered through the cracks in the wall, bringing the smell of wet earth and fear. Mama didn't say a word. She took the old bundle of raw cloth and started gathering our clothes, which were few, 2 dented pots, her rosary that had belonged to my grandmother, and a small photograph of us that she kept wrapped in a piece of newspaper. Molly started to cry, clinging to Mama's skirt, not quite understanding what was happening, but sensing the danger in the air. Caleb, even though he was a child, stood still, quiet, with his fists clenched, trying to be a little man. And I was terrified, but tried not to show it. I helped Mama pack things. I picked up Molly when she wanted to be held. I held Caleb's cold little hand tight. We went out into that horrible storm. The rain soaked us to the bone in seconds. The clay stuck to our barefoot feet, and the wind shook the trees with a force that seemed to want to rip them from the ground. We didn't have money for a boarding house in the town. We didn't have relatives in the region who could take us in. My father had abandoned us, and now we were literally on the street, aimless, hopeless. That was when I saw Mama cry for the first time. They weren't just tears of despair, but of humiliation, of anger, of feeling completely alone in the world. She stopped in the middle of the muddy road, hugged the 3 of us at once, and sobbed as if her chest were going to break. But after a while, she wiped her face with the back of her hand, took a deep breath, and kept walking. Because that's what mothers did, my dears. They always continued, even when everything seemed lost. "Let's go to Robert's farm," she said, her voice firm, despite trembling with cold. "They say he was once a good man. Maybe he still has a bit of kindness stored away." It was our only hope on that dark Christmas Eve. To this day, I still don't know how we survived that walk without freezing. Perhaps it was pure adrenaline, or maybe, just maybe, the heat of a mother's desperate love created a shield that no winter storm could penetrate. Have you ever felt a strength you didn't know you had until you had no other choice? You know, my dears, when I started telling this story, I thought, has anyone else gone through this? Are there other women out there who have also felt this tightness in their chest? This fear of having nowhere to go? If you are listening to me now, and this story is touching your heart in some way, leave it here in the comments. You don't need to tell everything, but tell me what touched you the most so far. Was it Sarah's courage? Was it the despair of that night? Or was it remembering something you lived yourself? We walked for hours in that rain, my dears. The dirt road had turned into a slippery mud pit, and every step seemed heavier than the last. Molly whimpered softly in Mama's arms, all curled up, trying to protect herself from the cold rain that gave no truce. Caleb walked beside me, holding my hand tight, and I felt his little fingers cold as ice. The sky was so dark it seemed like deep night. Even though it wasn't that late yet, lightning tore through the clouds every now and then, illuminating everything with that white and frightening light. And right after came the thunder, so loud it made Molly scream with fright. I tried to sing softly to her, that lullaby Mama always sang for us to sleep, but my voice came out trembling, weak, almost swallowed by the noise of the storm. I remember the smell of the rain that night was different. It wasn't just the common smell of wet earth, but there was something else. A strong smell of bruised grass, of leaves torn from the trees by the wind, of pure fear. It's funny how we never forget certain smells in life, isn't it? Almost 70 years have passed, but when it rains hard like that, I still feel that same tightness in my chest. Mama tripped twice in the mud, almost falling with Molly in her arms. The second time, she stopped, took a deep breath, and I saw she was praying softly. Her lips moved quickly, asking for protection, asking for a miracle, asking God not to abandon his children on that terrible night. "Mama, I'm cold," Caleb murmured, his teeth chattering. "I know, my son," she replied, her voice firmer than I expected, "but soon we'll get to a warm place. You'll see." But I realized she wasn't sure of that herself. We were going to the house of the farmer Robert, uninvited, without warning, not knowing if he would even open the door for us. It was an act of complete desperation. When we finally spotted the iron gate of the farm, my heart skipped a beat. It was a large gate, with beautiful scrollwork in the middle, but it was all rusted and closed. Through the bars, we could see the big house way in the back, imposing, with its whitewashed walls and shingled roof. There was a faint light in one of the upstairs windows, just one, as if it were a lonely lighthouse in the middle of all that darkness. Mama approached the gate and knocked hard. The sound of metal echoed in the rainy night, but no one appeared. She knocked again, even harder, and started screaming, "Please, is anyone there? I need help. I have children here." The wind carried her voice away, but she kept screaming, knocking, calling. Molly was crying loudly now, scared by it all. Caleb clung to me, trembling so much I felt my own bones shaking along. That was when I saw the light in the window get brighter. A male figure appeared, looking down. Even from afar, even with the rain blurring the view, I could see he hesitated. He stood there, just looking at the four of us. A soaked woman holding a small child in her arms, and another clinging to her skirt, all shivering with cold at the gate of his house. And then the light went out. My heart sank at that moment, my dears. He was going to leave us there in the rain, on Christmas Eve, with small children. For a terrifying moment, it seemed like the last glimmer of hope had been extinguished. But stay with me, because that closed door is about to be opened by an unlikely angel, and it marks the beginning of a transformation that will warm even the coldest of hearts. Mama let out a choked sob and leaned against the freezing gate, as if her legs could no longer hold the weight of everything. The husband's abandonment, Frank's humiliation, and now this rejection. "God, please," she murmured, her voice broken. "Don't let my children die of cold." But then, as if it were a real answer to prayer, another light turned on, this time on the ground floor of the house. And right after, we saw a small figure running down the stone path, holding a lantern that swung in her hand. It was an elderly woman with white hair in a bun, wearing a red shawl over her shoulders. "Hold on, you poor souls! I'm coming!" she shouted as she ran, her voice high-pitched but full of concern. She reached the gate, panting, pulled a large key from her apron pocket, and opened that heavy gate with a strength I didn't imagine such a tiny lady could have. "God's creatures soaked on Christmas Eve!" she exclaimed, pulling us inside urgently. "What a shame to leave you out in the open. Come quickly before you catch pneumonia." It was Mrs. Betty, the housekeeper. She had light brown eyes, full of kindness, and a maternal way that reminded me of my grandmother, whom I had known when I was very small. She closed the gate behind us and started walking quickly toward the house, talking non-stop. "What happened, my child? How did you end up here in this horrible storm? Where is the husband?" Mama couldn't answer, just shook her head. And Mrs. Betty understood everything without needing more words. "Let's go inside immediately," she said, her tone softening. "We can talk later." She took us not through the main entrance of the house, but through a side door that led straight into the kitchen. And what a kitchen that was, my dears. Huge, with a cast-iron stove lit that made the whole room warm. A large wooden table in the center, copper pots hanging on the wall, and a delicious smell of cinnamon and cloves that made me realize how hungry I was. There were two other maids in the kitchen, one younger with black braids and another middle-aged one, plump with rosy cheeks. Mrs. Betty started giving orders quickly. "Carol, get clean towels. Ruby, heat up milk and put in brown sugar. These children are freezing." They ran to obey. In a few minutes, we were wrapped in thick, soft towels, sitting near the stove that crackled softly, with mugs of hot, sweet milk in our hands. Ruby brought biscuits with fresh butter, still warm, and slices of white cheese. Molly stopped crying as soon as she started eating, stuffing huge pieces of biscuit into her little mouth. Caleb ate as if he had never seen food in his life, eyes wide with so much goodness. I couldn't stop looking around, amazed. That kitchen was bigger than our entire house on Mr. Donald's ranch. The walls were painted a light yellow, the color of a country egg yolk, and there was a large window with white lace curtains. On the sill, there were small pots with mint and basil that perfumed the air along with the smell of burning wood. That was when I heard heavy footsteps coming from the hallway. We all looked at the door. Mrs. Betty straightened up, wiped her hands on her apron, and stood in a position that seemed, at the same time, respectful and defiant. Farmer Robert entered the kitchen. He was a tall man, broad-shouldered, dark hair with some gray strands at the temples. He had deep eyes, almost black, and a closed expression that made him look older than he probably was. He wore a white shirt with rolled-up sleeves and dark trousers, and had a rigid posture, as if carrying an invisible weight on his shoulders. He looked at the four of us, Mama still soaked, even with the towel around her. Molly with her little mouth dirty with butter, Caleb holding tight to the mug of milk, and me trying to seem invisible. "Mrs. Betty," he said, his voice deep and emotionless. "What is going on here?" "You know very well what is going on," Mrs. Betty replied, crossing her arms. "This family was dying of cold out there, and I wasn't going to let that happen." "No, sir." "I didn't authorize it," he said dryly. "Then fire me," she retorted, lifting her chin. "But these children are staying here at least tonight, whether you want it or not." The silence that fell was so heavy that even the crackling of the wood seemed to get louder. I saw Mama hold Molly tighter, as if she were preparing to have to go out again into that storm. Farmer Robert looked at each of us slowly. When his eyes met Molly's, who stared at him with those big, frightened eyes, I saw something change in his face. It was quick, almost imperceptible, but I noticed. A pain crossed that cold mask. "Give them food and dry clothes," he said finally, his voice coming out hoarse. "Tomorrow morning they go." He turned to leave, but Mrs. Betty took a step forward, tiny but brave as a soldier. "Mr. Robert, you are going to send 3 children and a mother to the street on Christmas Day? What kind of man have you become?" Mrs. Margaret would be ashamed. What happened next was etched in my memory forever. He stopped mid-step, his back became even stiffer, and he closed his eyes so hard I saw his jaw muscles contract. His hands clenched into fists at his sides, trembling slightly. When he opened his eyes again, they were moist. "All right," he said, so quietly I almost didn't hear. "They can stay, but keep them away from me." And he left the kitchen without looking back, his footsteps echoing down the hallway until they disappeared into the darkness of the big house. It wasn't just Mrs. Betty's scolding that stopped him, my dears. I believe that in that moment, looking at our shivering bodies, he saw the ghosts of his own family. He realized that pushing us out into the cold would be like killing them all over again. That night, Mrs. Betty took us to a small room at the back of the big house. It was a small room, but clean, with 2 twin beds covered by colorful patchwork quilts. It smelled good, like clothes washed with coconut soap. The walls were whitewashed, and there was a small window with a flowered cotton curtain. "Rest now," she said, arranging the pillows. "Tomorrow we'll talk better." Mama tucked us in and sat on the edge of the bed, stroking Molly's hair until she fell asleep. Caleb passed out as soon as his head hit the pillow. I pretended to sleep, but kept watching Mama. She stayed there quiet, looking at the 3 of us, and then started to cry again. But this time, it was relief. Relief to be in a dry and warm place. I woke up to the smell of fresh bread and brewed coffee. Sunlight entered through the small window, illuminating the room with that beautiful golden morning light of summer. For the first time in a long time, I had woken up without the crowing of Mr. Donald's rooster calling us to work, without the rush to get up before the sun rose. When we went down to the kitchen, Mrs. Betty was already preparing breakfast. The table was set. "Doan moi, Surya." "Sit, sit," Mrs. Betty called us. "Children have to eat well." Molly started eating with a very ravenous appetite. Caleb was quiet, thoughtful, and I couldn't stop thinking about Farmer Robert. Mama tried to help wash the dishes after breakfast, but Mrs. Betty wouldn't let her. "You need to rest, Mrs. Sarah," she said firmly. "You went through a terrible night. The children can play in the yard. There's plenty of space." That was how we started our first days on that farm. Caleb, curious as he always was, ended up going to explore the surroundings and found the stables. There he met old Arthur, the horse handler, a gentleman with white hair and calloused hands, who took care of the animals with infinite patience. Caleb was enchanted by the horses, especially a light brown mare, gentle, with sweet eyes. "This here is Star," old Arthur explained, stroking the animal's neck. She was the favorite of the little girl. Caleb asked nothing more, just stayed there helping old Arthur brush the horses, fill the troughs with water. The old handler taught my brother how to pet the horse the right way, to speak softly so as not to scare it. Molly, in turn, stuck to Mrs. Betty as if she were her grandmother. She followed the housekeeper through the whole house, helping to fold sheets, pick herbs from the garden, sort beans in the sieve. Mrs. Betty treated her with a tenderness that made my heart squeeze. She clearly missed having children around. And I discovered the library. It was on the third day. I was exploring the house when I saw a door ajar in the hallway of the second floor. I pushed it slowly and almost fainted at what I saw. It was a huge room, with dark wooden shelves that went from floor to ceiling, all packed with books. Hundreds, maybe thousands of books, with leather covers, fabric covers, some worn by time, others still brand new. It had a special smell in there, smell of old paper, of waxed wood, of knowledge kept waiting to be discovered. Sunlight streamed through a large window, making the dust dance in the air like little golden stars. I stood in the doorway, lacking the courage to enter, just looking at all that treasure. I had never seen so many books together in my life, nor did I know there were so many books in the whole world. "Do you like books?" I almost jumped with fright. Farmer Robert was standing behind me, so quiet I hadn't heard him arrive. I turned quickly, heart pounding, racing. "Sorry, sir," I stammered. "I didn't mean to. I was just looking." "I asked if you like books," he repeated, his voice still deep, but not as cold as on the first night. "I love them, sir," I replied softly, feeling my cheeks get hot. He watched me for a moment, as if deciding something. Then he walked into the library and took a book from one of the lower shelves. It was a book with a green cover and gold letters. "My daughter loved them too," he said. And for the first time, I saw his expression soften, even if just a little bit. "She was your age when..." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. He stood there, holding that book in his large hands, eyes lost somewhere distant that only he could see. "Do you know how to read?" he asked after a while. "Yes, sir. Mama taught me." He handed me the book. "You can read it, but take good care of it." I took the book with both hands, as if it were made of gold. It was a collection of fairy tales with colorful illustrations on the pages, the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. "Thank you, sir," I murmured, clutching the book to my chest. He just nodded and left the library, leaving the door ajar, a silent invitation for me to return. And I returned every day. In those early days on the farm, we began to find our places in that new world. Caleb in the stables, Molly in the kitchen, and me among the books. Mama helped with what she could, always discreet, always grateful, never talking about what had happened or how much longer we could stay. But I felt something was changing. I saw it in the way Farmer Robert started appearing in the library when I was there, leafing through books in silence, in the way he sometimes stopped to watch Caleb helping old Arthur, in the way his face softened when Molly laughed in the kitchen. The house, which used to be silent as a cemetery, was starting to have sounds of life again, and the man who was dead inside began, very slowly, to breathe again. Weeks passed, and the four of us started to feel part of that farm. Mama helped Mrs. Betty in the house, always discreet, always grateful for every day we could stay. Caleb spent entire afternoons in the stables, coming back smelling of horse and hay, eyes shining when he told about what he had learned with old Arthur. Molly walked behind Mrs. Betty like a duckling, imitating everything the housekeeper did, speaking in her own little way, and I lived among the books. Every afternoon, after helping Mama with chores, I went up to the library. Farmer Robert started appearing more frequently, always silent, always serious, but no longer with that coldness of the first night. He would take a book, sit in the leather armchair near the window, and read in silence. Sometimes I felt his gaze on me, but when I raised my head, he was already back to the book. One day, I was trying to understand a difficult word in a story I was reading, furrowing my brow, rereading the same sentence several times. I heard his deep voice behind me. "Having trouble?" I turned, startled. He was standing beside me, looking over my shoulder at the book open in my lap. "It's this word here, sir." I pointed with my finger. "Melancholy. I don't know what it means." He stood quiet for a moment, as if the word hurt him. "Melancholy is not just sadness, Hazel," he explained, his voice getting lower, trembling slightly like a dry leaf in the wind. It is the art of mourning what we still have, because we are too afraid to lose it again. It is waking up and feeling an emptiness in the chest so heavy that you wonder how your heart keeps beating around it. I looked at him and saw that the pain in his eyes wasn't fresh. It was ancient, fossilized. It was the look of a man who had been apologizing for being alive. "Do you feel that, sir?" I asked softly, a question that felt dangerous, like walking on thin ice. He didn't get mad. Instead, he closed the book slowly, as if closing a coffin. "Every day," he whispered, looking at his own hands as if they belonged to a stranger. "I feel like a house with all the lights turned off, Hazel, and I've forgotten where the switches are." "Mama feels it too," I said, remembering the nights I had seen her crying since my father left. We stayed in silence for a while. Outside, the singing of birds in the branches of the apple tree and the gentle wind swaying the leaves could be heard. It was a comfortable, shared silence, as if we were holding each other's pain without needing more words. There is something so profound about two lonely souls finding comfort in shared silence. Robert is finally letting someone in, but as their bond grows stronger, the outside world is preparing to tear them apart. You won't believe the malice they are about to face. They say that grief is love with nowhere to go. In that library, surrounded by dusty books, two lonely souls finally found a place to put that love down. It was the first time since my father left that I didn't feel invisible. "You are a very smart girl," he said finally. "Your mother must be very proud." I felt my chest swell with joy at those words. From that day on, he started teaching me for real. He explained difficult words, told stories about the authors of the books, showed me where countries were on the maps he had in the library. Sometimes, Mama appeared in the doorway with a tray of mint tea and starch biscuits, and I saw the way he looked at her, quick, almost hidden, but different from the way he looked at other people. But not everything was flowers, my dears. One afternoon I was returning from the town with Mrs. Betty, who had gone to buy groceries. We passed in front of Mr. Jerry's store when I heard familiar voices. It was a group of women from the region gossiping at the door of the shop. "They say Sarah is living there at Robert's farm," one of them spoke, voice full of malice. "Abandoned woman living in a widower's house," another completed, and didn't need to say anything else. The tone said it all. "Poor Mrs. Margaret," a third sighed with false pity. "Barely cold in the grave, and there's already another occupying her place." I felt my face get hot with anger. Mrs. Betty squeezed my hand tight, pulling me to keep walking. But I had heard, and worse, I knew Mama would eventually hear too. The gossip started to spread through the region like fire in dry pasture. In the following weeks, when we went to church on Sundays, people looked at us sideways, whispered when we passed. Some were polite to Mama's face, but you could feel the judgment in their eyes. Mama started to get quieter, more withdrawn. She went back to having that look of humiliation she had when my father left her. I saw her praying longer at night, kneeling at the edge of the bed, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles turned white. One night, I heard her talking to Mrs. Betty in the kitchen. I went there to get water and stopped in the hallway upon hearing my mother crying. "Mrs. Betty, I can't stay here," she said, voice choked. "People are talking bad. I don't want to cause trouble for Mr. Robert. He has suffered enough. He doesn't deserve to have his name stained because of me." "Nonsense," Mrs. Betty replied firmly. "The tongue of envious people is worth nothing. Mr. Robert knows you are an honorable woman, but what about the children?" Mama insisted. "Hazel is already hearing things in the town. Caleb will start hearing too. Molly is still small, but one day she will understand. I can't let my children grow up being pointed at as she couldn't finish the sentence. She scrubbed her arms violently with the dish rag, as if trying to wash away a stain that wasn't on her skin, but on her soul. "I am a curse to him, Betty," she whispered, her voice cracking under the weight of a shame that wasn't hers to carry. "He opens his door to us, and I bring him nothing but mud and whispers. A woman abandoned by her husband is like a cracked vessel in this world. No matter how much you try to fill it with dignity, people only see the cracks. I won't let Robert break because of my cracks." I leaned my forehead against the cold wall of the hallway, feeling tears run down my face. It wasn't fair. Mama hadn't done anything wrong. We hadn't done anything wrong. We were just trying to survive, trying to rebuild our life after being abandoned. "Sarah, Mrs. Betty spoke with that voice of someone who has lived a lot and learned a lot. "I've known Mr. Robert since he was a boy. He is different since you arrived. He is coming back to life. Do you think I'm going to let that die because of gossip from people with nothing to do? No way. Tomorrow I will speak with him. He needs to know what they are saying and make a decision about it. I ran back to the room before they saw me. I lay down next to Molly, who slept peacefully, oblivious to all the adult problems. I stared at the ceiling, at the shadows the moon made through the curtain, thinking about how happiness could be fragile. We had found a safe, warm place, full of books and horses and good food. We had found good people who took care of us, and now all that could end because of the malice of tongues made of poison. The next day, after lunch, I saw Mrs. Betty taking Farmer Robert to his office. She closed the door, but even from afar, one could hear the serious tone of the conversation. I sat on the stairs, pretending to read, but with ears attentive. When the door opened, Farmer Robert's face was red with anger. It wasn't anger at us, I realized. It was anger at the people who were talking. He passed by me without saying anything, went straight to the stables, and I heard him mounting a horse and riding off in a rush. Mrs. Betty came out of the office shortly after, saw me sitting there and sighed. "Don't worry, child," she said. But for the first time I saw uncertainty in her eyes. "Everything will be all right." But at that moment, my dears, I wasn't so sure of that. At night, Mama gathered us in the little room. Her eyes were red from crying, but her voice was firm when she spoke. "Children, maybe we need to leave soon. Find another place to live." "Why?" Mama Molly asked, lip trembling. "I like it here." "I know, my love. I like it too. But sometimes things don't depend only on us wanting them." Caleb looked at me, and I saw in his face the same sadness I felt in my heart. We had just found a home, and now we were going to lose it again. It was the first time I understood that in the adult world, often it doesn't matter how honest or good you are. It matters what people say about you. Days of heavy silence passed on the farm. Farmer Robert didn't appear in the library anymore. Mama walked around the house like a ghost, doing her chores with downcast eyes, avoiding crossing paths with him in the hallways. Caleb became quieter, even in the stables with old Arthur. Molly was the only one who didn't seem to understand the gravity of the situation, still following Mrs. Betty through the kitchen with her cheerful little way. I saw Mama gathering our few things slowly, folding the clothes Mrs. Betty had given us, wrapping Grandma's rosary back in the piece of newspaper. She was preparing to leave, even without having anywhere to go. On a Sunday morning, after church, we were returning to the farm when we met Farmer Robert on the road. He was on foot, coming from the opposite direction, hands in his trouser pockets, expression closed. When he saw us, he stopped. Mama stopped too, holding Molly by the hand. Caleb came close to me. The silence between them was so intense that even the birds seemed to go quiet. "Mrs. Sarah," he said finally, taking the straw hat from his head, "I need to speak with you, Mr. Robert." I was already thinking of, Mama started, but he raised his hand, asking for silence. "Please, let me speak first." Mama nodded, squeezing Molly's hand tighter. "Children," he looked at the three of us, "go ahead with Mrs. Betty." "I need to talk to your mother alone," Mrs. Betty, who was coming right behind, called us with a wave. I didn't want to go. I wanted to stay and protect Mama, but I obeyed. As we walked, I turned my head back several times, seeing the two standing in the middle of the dusty road, facing each other. When we got to the farm, I couldn't sit still. I ran up to my favorite spot, the thick branch of the old oak tree in the backyard, from where I could see the road. I sat there, swinging my legs, heart beating fast, waiting. That was when I saw the two returning together. They weren't at that formal distance as before. They walked side by side, and even from afar, I noticed something had changed. Mama's eyes were red as if she had cried, but there was something different in the way she walked. Head was held high, shoulders less hunched. I climbed down from the tree quickly and went to the kitchen, where Mrs. Betty pretended to be busy preparing lunch. But I knew she was anxious too. When Mama and Farmer Robert entered through the kitchen door, everyone stopped what they were doing. Ruby dropped the wooden spoon. Carol stopped peeling potatoes. "Mrs. Betty turned with hands on her hips. "Mrs. Betty," Farmer Robert said, voice firm, "call all the farm workers. I want to make an announcement." Half an hour later, everyone was gathered in the yard, in front of the big house. Old Arthur, the cowboys, the field workers, the housemaids, even the boy who tended the vegetable garden. The four of us stayed in a corner, not quite understanding what was happening. Farmer Robert went up the 3 steps of the porch, standing in a position where everyone could see him well. The afternoon sun hit his back, creating a long shadow on the packed earth ground. I want everyone here present to listen well to what I am going to say, he began, voice loud and clear, and I want you to spread it through the entire region so that no one remains in doubt. He paused, looking at each person gathered there. Mrs. Sarah and her children are not temporary guests on this farm. This is their home now, and will continue to be for as long as they want to stay. Anyone who speaks ill of this family, who spreads gossip or slander, will be speaking ill of me too, and I will not tolerate it. I heard some murmurs among the workers, but he continued, voice becoming even firmer. Mrs. Sarah is an honorable woman, hard-working and of exemplary character. She was wronged, abandoned, humiliated, but never lost her dignity. Any man who had the privilege of knowing her should consider himself blessed, and anyone who says otherwise will have to answer directly to me. There is nothing more powerful than a man standing firm to protect a woman's dignity. Robert didn't just silence the rumors, he claimed his family in front of everyone. But don't get too comfortable yet, because this act of defiance is about to provoke a dangerous enemy who doesn't play by the rules. I felt my heart race. I looked at Mama and saw she had brought her hand to her mouth, eyes teary. Furthermore, he continued, and now his voice became softer, but no less firm. I want everyone to know that I intend to court Mrs. Sarah properly, with respect and honor, as she deserves. And God willing, and if she accepts, one day ask her to marry me. The silence that fell was absolute. Not even the wind dared to make noise. It was old Arthur who broke the silence, taking off his hat and clapping slowly. Missus. Betty joined him, and soon everyone was applauding. I saw tears running down old Arthur's wrinkled face, and he shouted, "May God bless you, boss. It's time for this house to have joy again." Farmer Robert went down the steps and walked straight to Mama. He stopped in front of her, and there, in front of everyone, took her hand in his. "Sarah," he said, and for the first time I saw his eyes shining with something other than pain. "I know what it is to carry the sadness of a loss. You know what it is to carry the humiliation of a rejection. We are two broken hearts for different reasons, but broken in the same way." Mama started to cry, silent tears running down her face. "That man who abandoned you was a fool," he continued, voice becoming hoarse with emotion. "Any man who leaves a woman of your strength, your dignity, your courage, does not deserve to be called a man. He didn't know the treasure he had." "But I know, Robert," Mama murmured, voice trembling. "I'm not asking for an answer now," he said gently. "I know you need time, but I want you to know that in this house you will never again be humiliated, never again be undervalued, and your children will grow up with heads held high, knowing they are loved and protected." It was Caleb who moved first. My little brother, who had been so hurt when our father left, walked up to Farmer Robert and hugged him around the waist, squeezing tight. The big man was surprised for a moment. Then he ran his large hand through Caleb's hair, in a paternal gesture that made my chest ache with so much emotion. Molly didn't stay behind, ran and clung to his leg, and he bent down to pick her up. She rested her little head on his shoulder, and I saw his face transform, the hardness vanishing, giving way to a tenderness that had probably been stored away for years. I went to Mama, who was crying so much she could barely stand. I hugged her around the waist and she squeezed me tight, kissing my hair. "Is everything okay now, Mama?" I asked softly. "It is, my daughter," she replied, voice choked but happy. For the first time in a long time, everything is okay. That afternoon, the whole farm had a festive air. Mrs. Betty killed 2 chickens and made a stew with okra and grits, which she served to all the workers. Ruby prepared sticky pecan clusters with caramelized sugar, piled high on a platter in the center of the table. Carol made lemonade with mint, ice cold, which everyone drank from aluminum mugs. The workers' children, who used to watch us from afar, came to play with us. We ran through the yard, played tag among the trees, laughed loud, as we hadn't done in a long time. At night, sitting on the porch with Mama, I watched Farmer Robert talking to old Arthur near the stables. The moon was full, silvery, illuminating everything with that soft light that seemed to bless the whole farm. "Mama," I spoke softly, "will you accept?" when he asks. She stayed quiet for a moment, looking at the stars starting to appear in the dark sky. "You know, Hazel, I spent so much time feeling broken after your father left. I thought no decent man would want an abandoned woman with 3 children. I thought my worth had gone away with him." She looked at me, eyes still moist, but shining in the lantern light. "But Robert made me understand something important today. It wasn't me who lost value when your father left. It was he who lost the privilege of having me." I smiled, feeling my heart fill with pride for my mother. And yes, she said, a small but true smile appearing on her lips when he asks, I will accept that night. For the first time since I could remember, I heard Mama humming softly before sleeping. It wasn't a song of sadness, but of hope. And I understood that sometimes God closes doors not to punish us, but to guide us to bigger, more beautiful windows that we didn't even know existed. The months that followed were the happiest I had lived until then, my dears. The whole farm seemed to have gained new life, as if Farmer Robert's declaration had driven away not only the gossip, but also the shadows that weighed on that place. The courtship began in the most respectful way possible. Farmer Robert, who now asked us to call him just Robert when we were with family, started having breakfast with us in the big kitchen. Before, he ate alone in the office, leafing through papers and farm records. Now he sat at the head of the table, talked to Caleb about the horses, listened to Molly tell invented stories, and exchanged shy glances with Mama over coffee cups. I watched everything with the attention of someone discovering how love could be born again, even in hurt hearts. I saw how he waited for Mama to pour her cup first before taking his, how he offered the last piece of cornbread to her, even when it was clear he wanted it too, how his face got a little flushed when their hands touched by accident reaching for the sugar bowl at the same time. Mama was different too. She went back to wearing a small flower in her hair, a habit she had abandoned when my father left. She started humming while hanging clothes on the line, old melodies I hadn't heard in years. She laughed more, and when she laughed, her eyes shone in that way I saw in old photographs of her, from when she was a young woman. One afternoon, Robert appeared in the library where I was reading, carrying a wooden box. Hazel, I want to show you something, he said, sitting in the chair next to me. He opened the box carefully, and inside was a collection of leather-bound notebooks. They were diaries, I realized, with dates written in neat letters on the cover. These were my daughter Emma's, he said, voice soft, but without that piercing pain from before. She loved writing stories, poems, thoughts about the day. I think you are like her in that. I felt my chest tighten. It was the first time he spoke about his lost daughter with tranquility, without his eyes getting moist immediately. I want you to have them, he continued, placing the box in my lap, not to read what she wrote, that is hers, but to use the blank notebooks that were left over, to write your own stories. Are you sure, sir? I asked, almost whispering. I am, he replied, and for the first time I saw a true smile on his face. Emma would like to know that another girl who loves books is using her notebooks, that they aren't just kept in a box turning to dust. I hugged the box to my chest, feeling hot tears in my eyes. Thank you, was all I could say. He ran his hand over my hair, a paternal gesture that made me feel something I didn't know was missing. The feeling of having a real father. Caleb was also blooming. Old Arthur taught him to ride a horse, and my brother spent hours riding through the property with the old handler. Robert bought a smaller saddle, the right size for Caleb, and I saw my brother grow in confidence every day. He who was so quiet, so withdrawn after our father left, now spoke excitedly about horse breeds, planting hay, fixing fences. One morning, Robert called Caleb to the office. I stayed hidden behind the door, too curious not to pique Caleb, he said seriously. One day this farm will need someone to manage it, someone who understands land, animals, people. Would you like to learn? I saw Caleb's eyes widen. You are saying I can. I am saying I want to teach you, Robert replied, not as an employee, but as a son learning from his father. Caleb was so moved he couldn't speak. He just nodded, eyes shining. Robert stood up, went to him, and for the first time, hugged my brother. I saw Caleb cling to him like someone finally finding the safe harbor he needed. Molly had become the absolute darling of everyone. When she wasn't with Mrs. Betty in the kitchen, she was in the garden with Ruby, learning to water the flowers, or she was in the living room, sitting on Robert's lap while he read stories to her. She called him Uncle Bob, with that small child way that melts the hardest heart. I saw Robert, who before couldn't stand hearing children's laughter because it hurt too much, now seek out these moments. He who avoided his deceased daughter's room as if it were haunted. One day he opened the door, went in, and started arranging things carefully. He put the small dresses in a cedar chest, put the dolls on a pretty shelf he had made, transformed the pain into honored memory. Margaret and Emma wouldn't want me to live like a dead man, he said once to Mama, without knowing I was listening from the hallway. They would want me to live, to love again, to take care of those in need. And Mama replied with a voice full of understanding. And my husband, who abandoned me, did me a favor, even without knowing. He brought me to you. On Sunday afternoons after church, Robert started taking us for outings. We went to the creek that cut through the property, where the water was crystal clear and cold. Molly played in the shallow part, chasing silvery minnows that swam among the rocks. Caleb climbed the trees on the bank and jumped into the water, shouting with joy. Mama sat on a large rock, dipping her feet, and Robert sat beside her, talking softly about plans for the farm, about the future, about dreams they had kept for so long. I wrote, sitting under an old cottonwood tree, using the notebooks that had been Emma's. I wrote about everything I was living, about how sadness can give way to joy, about how families can form in unexpected ways, about how love doesn't have just one form, but thousands. It was on one of those afternoons that Mrs. Betty appeared at the creek, all panting from running so much. Mr. Robert, Mrs. Sarah, she called, waving a paper in her hand. A letter arrived. Robert stood up quickly, expression becoming serious. Letters weren't common back then, and usually brought important news. Not always good. He took the paper from Mrs. Betty's hands and read in silence. I saw his face change, eyes narrowing, jaw becoming tense. Mama approached worriedly. What is it? It's from Mr. Donald, he said, voice tense. He is demanding that Sarah return to work on his ranch. Says she ran away without paying the debts she had with the foreman. Mama went pale, but that is a lie. Frank kicked us out and the debts were invented, deducted from my wages for things I didn't do. I know, Robert said, folding the letter forcefully, and he knows too. This is just a way to try to humiliate you again, to show power. He looked at Mama with an intensity I had never seen. But it won't work, Sarah. I won't let it. That night, Robert rode to the town. He returned late, when we were all in bed, but I woke up to the sound of his conversation with Mrs. Betty in the kitchen. I spoke with the judge and the sheriff. He was saying, I showed that Sarah never had real debts, that she was unjustly expelled on Christmas Eve. Mr. Donald will receive a summons to prove the accusations he made, and Frank will have to explain some discrepancies in the accounting books I mentioned. You are a good man, Robert, I heard Mrs. Betty say affectionately. Mrs. Margaret would be proud. I'm just protecting those I love, he replied simply. I went back to bed with my heart warm. We had found not just a home, but a defender, someone who wouldn't let the world hurt us again. And I realized that this was what a real family did, protected itself, defended itself, loved itself unconditionally. The judge's summons reached Mr. Donald on a Thursday morning. I know this because old Arthur heard it in the town and told everyone. They said the landowner turned red with anger, tore the paper in front of the messenger, and swore he would fix that situation. It didn't take long for us to find out what he meant. 3 days later, Robert returned from a meeting in the city with a gloomy expression. He went into the office and called Mrs. Betty. I stayed behind the door with that curious child habit. Mr. Donald is spreading rumors that I intend to marry Sarah just to have a free maid, I heard him say, voice loaded with anger. That I am taking advantage of an abandoned and vulnerable woman. What a despicable man, Mrs. Betty exclaimed. And there's more, Robert continued. He is saying that Sarah was fired for theft, that she took valuables when she left. My blood ran cold. I knew how much Mama valued her honesty. Are you going to sue him, Mrs. Betty asked. I already consulted the lawyer, but these things take time. And meanwhile, the gossip spreads like a plague. The landowner knows that night, Mama found out. I saw when Robert called her to the garden, away from us children, and told her everything. There is no weapon more cowardly than a lie whispered to destroy a woman's reputation, isn't it? Sarah is terrified, thinking she brings shame to this house, but she is forgetting one crucial thing. She is no longer fighting alone. Stay tuned, because Robert is about to show us exactly what a real man does when his family is under attack. Even from afar, I could see her body shudder, hands going to her face. In the following days, things got worse. When we went to the town, some people who used to greet us now averted their eyes. At Sunday Mass, I noticed a group of ladies whispering and looking at Mama with contempt. Mama tried to hide it from us, but I saw how she went back to walking with her head down. One night I woke up and found her kneeling in the kitchen, praying with desperate intensity. Please God, she whispered, don't let my children pay for my mistakes. If I need to leave to protect their reputation, give me strength. I wanted to run and hug her immediately. Tell her it wasn't her fault. That none of this was, but I stood still in the doorway with a broken heart. It was Caleb who suffered the first direct attack. He was in the town with old Arthur, buying feed for the horses when 3 older boys surrounded him. One of them was Mr. Donald's son, an arrogant young man who always had everything in life. "Look at that," the boy mocked. "The thief's son who thinks he owns Robert's farm." Old Arthur told me later that Caleb turned red, fists clenched, but didn't answer, tried to pass. But the boys blocked the way. "That fake stepfather of yours is making a fool of your mama," another boy provoked, sneering. "He's just using her as a free maid. You really think a rich man like him is gonna marry trash like her? Your fake stepfather must be laughing at your mother." Another provoked, "Using her as a maid and still making everyone think he's going to marry her." That was when Caleb lost control. Even being smaller and younger, he threw himself at the landowner's son. He got the worst of the fight, came home with a black eye and a cut lip, but old Arthur said he had fought with the bravery of a man. When Robert saw Caleb's state, his expression became dangerous. "Who did this?" Caleb hesitated, but ended up telling. "I saw Robert's jaw contract, hands closing into fists. Tomorrow I'm going to Mr. Donald," he said, voice low but full of determination. "This has crossed the line." Mama held his arm. "No, please, it will make everything worse. He is waiting for exactly that. A reaction from you, Sarah." "They hurt Caleb," Robert exclaimed. "I won't stand by with crossed arms while they attack a child." I know, Mama said, and I saw tears in her eyes. "But Robert, maybe it's better if the children and I leave. That way things go back to normal for you." The silence that fell was absolute. Even the air seemed to stop moving. "What?" Robert said incredulously. "I don't want to cause more trouble," Mama continued, voice breaking. "You have suffered enough. Your reputation, your peace, I can't destroy that. Sarah, look at me." He took her face between his hands. "Do you think I care what Mr. Donald or any other gossip thinks? Do you think I'm going to let you go because some cowards have nothing better to do?" "But Caleb was hurt, and he will be avenged," Robert declared, "but not the way the landowner expects. I will use the law, I will use the truth, and I will use every resource I have to end these slanders. But you are not going anywhere." He turned to all of us who had gathered to hear the discussion. "This is our family now. Families don't separate when things get tough. Families fight together." Molly started to cry, clinging to Mama's skirt. Caleb had shining eyes, even with the black eye. And I felt a wave of love so strong for that man we barely knew a few months ago, but who was willing to fight for us. Robert, Mama started. "No," he interrupted her gently. "I have already made my decision, and if anyone has a problem with it, let them come speak to me personally, Missus." Betty appeared in the kitchen doorway, wiping her hands on her apron. "You are absolutely right, sir," she said firmly. "And anyone who tries to separate this family will have to go through me too." Old Arthur entered right behind, taking off his hat. "And through me, boss. The boy Caleb is a good lad, didn't deserve what they did to him." One by one, the farm workers appeared, showing support. Ruby, Carol, the cowboys, the garden boy, all making it clear they were on our side. That night, despite all the storm forming around us, I felt something I had never felt before. The strength of belonging to something bigger than ourselves, the strength of a true family. But I didn't know, my dears, that the worst was yet to come. What happened in the following days was worse than we imagined, my dears. Mr. Donald wasn't just spreading gossip. He was using his influence to hurt us for real. First, the merchants in the town started refusing to sell to us. When Mrs. Betty went to buy flour and beans at Mr. Jerry's store, he said he had no more stock, but she saw the sacks piled behind the counter. When she went to the hardware store to get nails Robert had ordered, the owner said the order had been cancelled. "Orders from Mr. Donald," the man murmured without looking her in the eyes. "Sorry, Mrs. Betty, but I can't go against him. He has a lot of people in his hand." Robert had to start buying supplies in a neighboring town 3 hours away. That meant losing a whole day of work every time he needed something. I saw the frustration growing in him, the way he clenched his fists when they talked about the subject. Then came something even worse. One morning, Robert went to check the fences of the south pasture and found 3 dead cows. They had been poisoned, no doubt. Old Arthur examined the animals and found remains of a toxic plant that didn't grow naturally in that region. "It was on purpose, boss," the old handler said, voice heavy. "Someone brought this here and threw it for the animals to eat." Robert said nothing, but I saw his expression become somber as a storm cloud. That wasn't just about money or reputation. They were attacking his property, his livelihood, trying to destroy him financially. Mama was desperate when she found out. "It's my fault," she cried in the kitchen, while Mrs. Betty tried to console her. "All this is because of me. If I weren't here, it's not your fault, Sarah Mrs. Betty said firmly. "It's pure evil from Mr. Donald. He was always a bad man. He's just showing it more now." But Mama couldn't console herself. I saw her waste away in the following weeks, eating less and less, sleeping poorly. Sometimes she woke up at dawn and went to the small chapel on the farm. She stayed hours kneeling there, praying or crying or both. I was also suffering, my dears. At the school in the town, the other children started to avoid me. Those who used to play with me at recess now formed circles that excluded me. One girl even said to my face, "My mother said I can't be friends with a thief's daughter." I came home crying that day. Robert found me in the garden, sitting under the apple tree, my eyes swollen from crying. "What happened, Hazel?" he asked, sitting beside me. I told him everything. I saw the anger rise in his face, but he breathed deep, controlling himself. "Listen well to what I'm going to tell you," he spoke, taking my face in his large and calloused hands. "The words of cruel people do not define who you are. Your mother is the most honest woman I have ever met, and you are an intelligent, kind, and brave girl. Don't let anyone make you forget that." "But it hurts," I said, voice coming out small. "I know it hurts," he replied, and I saw in his eyes that he really knew. But the pain passes, character remains, and one day these same people will regret the words they said. Caleb stopped going to the town completely. After the fight, he didn't want to risk meeting Mr. Donald's son again. He started staying only on the farm, helping old Arthur with almost obsessive dedication. He worked from sun to sun, as if he wanted to forget everything that was happening. One afternoon, I found him crying behind the stable. My little brother, who always tried to be strong, was there sobbing, as if his heart were broken. "Caleb," I called softly. "I hate him, Hazel," he said between tears. "I hate the landowner. I hate our father who abandoned us. I hate everyone who makes Mama cry." I sat beside him and held his hand. I said nothing because there were no words. We just stayed there. Two siblings suffering together, trying to be strong for each other. It breaks your heart to see a child pay the price for adult cruelty. But notice how this attack didn't break them. It only welded them together stronger than steel. However, the storm isn't over yet. In fact, literally and figuratively, the heat is about to rise. It is a terrible thing to watch a child try to carry a man's burden. Caleb wasn't just fighting for his pride. He was fighting for the only thing we had left, our mother's honor. If you have a brother who protected you like that, mention his name in the comments to honor him today. Molly was too small to understand everything, but even she felt the tension. She stopped laughing so much, stayed glued to Mama, cried at night for no apparent reason. Children feel these things even without understanding. That was when the fire happened. It was a hot night, windless, and everyone was already asleep. I woke up to the smell of smoke and screams coming from outside. I jumped out of bed and ran to the window. The barn was in flames, the flames rising high, illuminating the whole night in orange and red. "Fire! Fire!" I heard old Arthur shouting, ringing the bell that was in the yard. In minutes, everyone was awake. The men ran with buckets, forming a chain from the well to the barn. The women wet cloths to protect the other buildings. Robert was in the middle of it all, shouting orders, organizing the firefighting. Mama gathered us, me, Caleb, and Molly, and kept us away, but we could see everything from there. The flames devoured the stored hay, the tools, the sacks of feed. It was a big loss. Very big. It took hours to control the fire. When the sun rose, what remained of the barn were just blackened walls and smoking ashes. Robert was covered in soot, hands burned in some spots, eyes red from smoke and fatigue. Old Arthur approached him, holding something in his hand. "Boss, I found this," he said, showing a piece of burnt cloth. It was near where the fire started. "It's cotton soaked in kerosene." Robert took the cloth, smelled it, and his expression became dangerous. "So, it was intentional." "No doubt, boss. Barn doesn't catch fire alone on a night without lightning." The silence that fell was heavy. All the workers were gathered there, exhausted, clothes dirty with soot, looking at Robert, waiting for his reaction. He stood still for a long moment, holding that piece of burnt cloth, jaw tense. Then he looked at everyone gathered there. "I know who is behind this," he said, voice low but firm. "And I know he wants to destroy me, wants to see me give up, send Sarah and the children away, go back to being the bitter and lonely man I was before." He paused, looking at each person there. "But I won't give him that pleasure. We will rebuild the barn. We will replant what was lost. We will continue." But boss old Arthur said with concern, "He won't stop. If he burned the barn today, tomorrow it could be the house, could hurt someone I know," Robert replied. "That's why tomorrow I'm going to the town to file a formal complaint. I'm going to the judge, the sheriff, whoever is needed. This has passed all limits." Mama was standing in the doorway of the house, pale as a sheet, with Molly in her arms. When Robert walked to her, I saw she was trembling. "Sarah," he started. "No." She interrupted him, voice breaking. "Don't say everything will be okay. Because it won't. He burned the barn today. Tomorrow it could be the house. It could be. They could hurt you. They could hurt the children." Tears ran down her face. "I can't let that happen, Robert. I can't be responsible for you or anyone here being hurt because of me." "You are not responsible for the evil of others," he said, taking her hands. "But I am responsible for protecting my children," she retorted. "And if staying here means putting them in danger," she didn't finish the sentence, but we all understood what she meant. That morning, with the barn still smoking in the background, I felt we were reaching a point of no return. Either we left and lost everything we had built there, or we stayed and risked consequences that could be terrible. And for the first time, my dears, I didn't know which of those options was the worst. That same morning, after the fire, Robert saddled the horse and left for the town before even having breakfast. He went straight to the police station, the courthouse, the judge's office. He returned at the end of the afternoon with a determined expression I hadn't seen in ages. He gathered all of us in the big room. Mama, us 3 children, Mrs., Betty, old Arthur, and the other workers who wanted to stay. "I filed a formal complaint against Mr. Donald," he announced. "The sheriff will investigate the fire. The judge issued a protection order. If he or any of his goons approach this property, they will be arrested." "But will that solve it?" Mama asked, voice full of doubt. "I don't know," Robert admitted honestly. "Ah, but it's what the law allows to be done, and I will use everything within my reach." Then he did something no one expected. He went to a drawer in the sideboard and took out a red velvet box. He opened it in front of everyone, revealing a simple but beautiful gold ring with a small light green stone in the center. "This ring belonged to my mother," he said, looking at Mama, and then Margaret. "I was going to wait longer, do this the right way, with a nice dinner, maybe music." He paused, eyes shining with emotion. "But I realized something after almost losing everything tonight. Life is too short to wait for the perfect moment, and I've already wasted too many years living like a dead man." He knelt in front of Mama, right there, in the room full of people, clothes still dirty with soot, hands with bandages from the burns. "Sarah, for 3 years, I worshipped my grief like a religion. I thought that being loyal to the dead meant closing the door to the living." He looked at her, his soot-stained face streaked with tears, looking more vulnerable than I had ever seen a man look. "But you and these children walked through the storm and kicked that door down. You didn't just bring light. You sat with me in the dark until I wasn't afraid of it anymore." Mama brought her hands to her mouth, her shoulders shaking. "I am not asking you to marry me, to save you from Mr. Fordian. Donald," he continued, his voice breaking, "I am asking you to marry me because you have already saved me from myself. We are 2 shattered people, Sarah, but I believe that if we hold on to each other tight enough, our broken pieces will fit together to make something stronger than what we were before. I love you, and I love these 3 children, as if they were mine." He took the ring from the box. "Sarah, will you accept to marry me? Accept to build a life together with all the joys and sorrows that come? Accept to let me be a father to these children and husband to you?" Most people would run away when the fire gets too hot, but Robert did the exact opposite. Proposing amidst the ashes isn't just romantic. It's a declaration of war against fear. But wait until you hear the shocking news the judge brings on their wedding day. It changes everything. The silence that fell was loaded with expectation. I saw Molly cling to Mama's skirt, little eyes wide. Caleb was tense, hands closed waiting, and I could barely breathe. Mama looked at him, then at the 3 of us, then at Mrs. Betty, who nodded encouragingly. When she turned her gaze back to Robert, she was smiling through tears. "I spent so long thinking I didn't deserve to be loved again," she said, voice trembling, That I was too broken, too stained by abandonment, but you showed me I was wrong. She extended her trembling hand. Yes, Robert, I accept. 1,000 times yes. He slid the ring onto her finger and stood up, pulling her into a hug. The room exploded in celebration. Mrs. Betty clapping and crying. Old Arthur whistling. The workers shouting congratulations. Molly started jumping and screaming. Mama's gonna get married. Mama's gonna get married without quite understanding, but happy anyway. Caleb looked at me and, for the first time in weeks, smiled. A true smile. Of relief. Of happiness. Of hope. And I felt as if a giant stone had been lifted from my chest. We were going to stay. We were going to be a real family. And no one, not Mr. Donald, nor anyone else, was going to be able to separate us. Mrs. Betty prepared a special supper that night, even with everyone exhausted from the fire. She killed 2 chickens, made chicken and dumplings, which were golden and fragrant, and prepared a tomato salad with onions and parsley. Ruby baked biscuits that were fluffy on the inside and crunchy on the outside, and Carol made a bread pudding with caramel sauce that shone like amber. We ate all together, bosses and employees, old folks and children, celebrating not just the engagement, but also resilience, the fact that we hadn't given up, even when everything seemed lost. In the middle of dinner, we heard horses approaching. Everyone tensed up. Robert stood up, hand going instinctively to the shotgun, which now stayed always close. But when the door opened, they weren't Mr. Donald's goons. It was Father Peter, the parish vicar, a man with white hair and kind eyes who had known Robert since he was a child. Robert, my son, he said, entering. I heard about the fire. I came to see if everyone is okay. We are, Father, Robert replied, relaxing. And we have good news too. Sarah agreed to marry me. The priest smiled widely. Thank God. It was about time this house had a real family again. He sat with us, accepted a plate of food, and talked at length with Robert and Mama about the wedding preparations. We can do it in 3 weeks, the priest suggested after publishing the banns. Unless there is a rush. There is no rush, Robert said, looking at Mama with tenderness. I just want to do it the right way. That was when the priest got serious. Robert, I need to tell you something. Mr. Donald came to see me yesterday, tried to convince me not to perform the wedding. He said Sarah was a woman of bad reputation, that you were being deceived. The room fell into absolute silence. I saw Robert clench his fists. And what did you say to him? He asked, voice controlled. I said I've known Sarah since she arrived here, that I saw her at Mass every Sunday, that I see her take care of the children with love and dedication. The priest replied firmly. I said that if there is anyone of bad reputation in this story, it isn't her, and that if he tries to interfere in a sacrament of the church, I will have to take more serious measures. Robert relaxed visibly. Thank you, Father. No need to thank me, the vicar said, smiling. I'm just doing what is right. And besides, it was about time someone stood up to that tyrant. That night, after the priest left and everyone retired, I stayed on the porch with Mama. She looked at the ring on her finger, turning it slowly, as if she still didn't believe it was real. Mama, I asked softly, are you scared? I am, she admitted. Very scared of the landowner, of what he can still do, of not being good enough for Robert. She looked at me. But you know what I discovered, Hazel? Fear doesn't mean you aren't brave. It means you are human. Courage is doing the right thing, even with fear. And marrying Robert is the right thing. She smiled, and it was the most beautiful smile I had seen on her. It's the most right thing I've ever done in my life. In the days that followed, something changed on the farm. It wasn't that the problems had disappeared. Mr. Donald was still out there. He was still a threat. But now we had something to fight for, not just something to run from. Robert hired 2 men for night watch. Old Arthur organized a shift system, so there was always someone awake, keeping an eye on any suspicious movement. The doors started to be locked at night, something that had never been done before. But we also started rebuilding the barn. Workers from neighboring farms, who knew of the landowner's malice and didn't agree with it, came to help on weekends. They brought wood, nails, tools. They worked for free, just to show solidarity. This is the difference between us and him, Robert told me one afternoon, watching the men work together. He rules by fear, we build with love and community. And he was right, my dears, because in the weeks that followed, while we prepared for the wedding and rebuilt what had been destroyed, We discovered we weren't as alone as we thought. Good still existed in the world, and sometimes it was stronger than evil. The week before the wedding was strange, my dears. There was joy and tension in the air, as if we were holding our breath. Mama spent those days sewing her dress with help from Mrs., Betty, and Ruby. It wasn't white lace. Mama said it wouldn't be appropriate. She chose an ivory-colored fabric, soft, with discreet embroidery of tiny flowers on the sleeves. I sat in the corner, watching the three women work. The sound of scissors cutting the fabric, the hum of the sewing machine, everything created an atmosphere of peace. One afternoon, when we were alone, Mama stopped sewing and looked at me. "Hazel, come here, my daughter." I sat beside her on the padded stool. She took my hands, and I saw she had tears in her eyes. "I want you to know something," she began, voice soft. "When your father left us, I thought my life was over. I thought I would never be happy again." She squeezed my hands. But God had other plans. He brought me to that storm because he knew that on the other side there was light. There was Robert. There was this house. There was a family waiting for us. "Do you think it was really God?" I asked. "Or was it just luck?" Mama smiled. A smile full of wisdom. "Luck is finding money on the street, my daughter. Miracle is finding a home when you are lost." She looked out the window at the orchard where Robert worked with Caleb. Robert was also lost in his own way. We found each other in the darkness, and together we are finding the light again. That night I couldn't sleep. I went to the library and lit the small lamp. I took one of the notebooks Robert had given me and started to write. I wrote about everything that had happened since that stormy night, about the fear, the hunger, the cold, about Mrs. Betty saving us, about meeting Robert, about seeing him change. I was so concentrated I didn't hear him enter calmly into the library. "Writing your memoirs," I raised my head startled. He was at the door, barefoot, hair messy. "Couldn't sleep," he said. "And writing helps organize thoughts." He came in and sat in the armchair next to me. "Can I know what you're thinking?" I closed the notebook slowly. I was thinking how everything changed so fast. A few months ago we were running in the rain with nowhere to go. Now we are here, and you are going to marry Mama, and we are going to have a real family. And does that scare you? I thought a little before answering. I'm afraid of waking up and discovering it was all a dream. Or worse, I'm afraid something goes wrong and we lose everything again. Robert stayed quiet for a moment, looking at the shelves full of books around. "You know, Hazel, when I lost Margaret and Emma, I thought I would never be able to love anyone again. The pain was too big. So I closed my heart, locked everything inside, and lived like a ghost for 3 years." He looked at me with an intensity that made me quiet. "But when I saw the 4 of you that night, soaked, desperate, with Molly crying, and your mother asking for help, something woke up inside me. A voice saying I still had a chance to live for real. And were you afraid?" "I was terrified," he admitted. "Fear of loving and losing again. Fear of not being good enough. Fear of betraying Margaret's memory. And how did you overcome the fear?" He smiled in that gentle way that made him very different from the closed man we first met. "I didn't overcome it completely. The fear is still here. But I learned that living with fear is better than not living for real. And your mother taught me that loving again doesn't erase the love that came before. It just proves our heart is bigger than we imagine." I stayed thinking about those words. I realized Robert was treating me like an adult, sharing deep thoughts that many wouldn't share with a child. "Hazel," he continued, "I want you to know that when I marry your mother, I'm not just gaining a wife. I'm gaining 3 children, and I will love and protect them as if they had been born from me." I felt hot tears in my eyes, even with everything happening, with the landowner trying to destroy everything, especially because of that, he said firmly. "Real family doesn't abandon when it gets hard. Family fights together." He stood up and came to me, placing his large hand on my shoulder. "And you, smart girl who loves books, will grow up in this house full of stories. You will study. You will learn. You will be whatever you want to be. Because now you have a father who believes in you." I couldn't hold it anymore. I stood up and hugged him tightly, crying on his chest. He hugged me back, tight, protective. And for the first time in my life, I felt what it was like to have a real father. When I went back to the room, Molly was awake, sitting on the bed. "Where were you?" she asked sleepily. "Talking to Robert," I replied, lying down next to her. "He's going to be our dad now. He is." Molly stayed quiet, thinking with that strange seriousness small children sometimes have. "I don't remember the other dad, right?" she said. The one who left? I remember only a little. It's okay not to remember, I said, smoothing her hair. Robert will be a better father. He chose to stay. And that is important. Choosing to stay is the most important thing in the world. She snuggled into me and went back to sleep. I stayed awake for a while, hearing her soft breathing, thinking about everything I had learned in those months. That night, I lay awake thinking about how much had changed. From the storm on Christmas Eve to the warmth of this safe house. I realized that even when things seem broken, they can be fixed in ways we never imagined. Love, I discovered, was strong enough to build a shelter for us all. And when I finally slept, I dreamed of the wedding, with Mama smiling for real, with a united family that no one, not Mr. Donald, nor anyone else, would manage to destroy. The wedding day dawned clear and beautiful, with the sky so clean it looked washed. I woke up early to the noise of people moving around the house. Mrs. Betty giving orders in the kitchen, Ruby arranging flowers, Carol polishing the silverware that would be used at the celebration lunch. Mama was nervous. I saw her hands trembling when she tried to pin up her hair, dropping the pins on the floor. I went to her and took her hand. Let me help, Mama. She sat in the chair, and I started to fix her hair, pinning it in a low, loose bun, with some strands loose framing her face. Mrs. Betty had gotten orange blossoms from a neighbor, and I tucked them delicately into the hairstyle. You look beautiful, Mama, I whispered. She looked in the mirror, and her eyes filled with tears. I never thought I would have a day like this again, Hazel. After your father left, I thought I would never deserve to be happy again. You always deserved it, I replied firmly. It was he who didn't deserve you. She hugged me so tight I almost couldn't breathe. When she finished dressing, Mama was radiant. The ivory dress fell perfectly. The flower embroidery shone softly in the sunlight coming through the window. Mrs. Betty brought the bouquet. White and red roses from the garden, tied with a satin ribbon. Mrs. Sarah, the housekeeper said, eyes moist. Mr. Robert is a blessed man. The chapel was a short walk from the big house. It was small and simple, with dark wooden pews and a humble altar decorated with more flowers from the garden. Father Peter was already there, smiling broadly, adjusting his embroidered stole. The farm workers arrived gradually, dressed in their best clothes. Old Arthur in a patched jacket, but clean. The cowboys with hair combed with brilliantine, the maids in flowered dresses. Some neighbors came too, not many. But the ones who came were those who had the courage to face Mr. Donald's disapproval. Caleb was beside Robert, trying to look like a grown man in the suit Robert had made for him. Molly held the basket of petals, so concentrated on her task she bit her lip nervously. And I was in my new dress of light pink fabric, feeling important for being part of that moment. When the chapel bell rang 3 times, announcing the arrival of the bride, everyone turned. Mama entered slowly, alone. She had no father to walk her to the altar, no family besides the 3 of us. But she walked with head held high, with dignity and grace, eyes fixed on Robert, who waited for her. And when I saw the expression on his face, seeing her walking towards him, my dears, I understood what true love was. It wasn't just passion or attraction. It was reverence, gratitude, choice. It was looking at someone and deciding every day to stay. Robert had tears running down his face, without any shame. When Mama reached the altar, he took her hands and whispered something only she heard, but that made her smile through her own tears. Father Peter began the ceremony with that solemn voice priests use for important moments. We are gathered here before God to unite in matrimony, Robert and Sarah. 2 hearts that suffered losses, but found in pain the strength to love again. He made them repeat the vows. When Robert said, I do, his voice echoed firmly through the chapel, a promise that would not be broken. When Mama said I do, it was almost a whisper, but loaded with an emotion so deep it seemed to fill the whole space. Robert, do you have the ring? He took a simple gold band from his pocket and held Mama's hand. Sarah, he said, improvising beyond the traditional vows, you brought light where there was only darkness. You brought laughter where there was only silence. You taught me that the heart has infinite capacity to start over. He slid the ring onto her finger. I promise to honor you, respect you, love you all the days God gives me. I promise to be a father to your children and a companion in good and bad times. You will never be alone again. Mama took the ring Robert had gotten for her to give him. Her hands trembled so much she almost dropped it, but he held them gently. Helping Robert, she started, voice failing, took a deep breath, and tried again. You showed me that an abandoned woman is not a broken woman. She is just a woman waiting for the love she really deserves. And you are that love." She placed the ring on him. "I promise to take care of you as you take care of us. I promise to honor the memory of who you lost. Never trying to replace, but honoring. And I promise that together we will build a family based on true love." "By the power vested in me," Father Peter said, smiling, "I pronounce you husband and wife. Robert, you may kiss your wife." It was a gentle, respectful kiss, but full of promise. And when they turned holding hands to face those present, everyone stood up applauding and shouting congratulations. Molly threw petals everywhere, laughing. Caleb whistled loudly, proud. And I cried tears of pure happiness. But it was when we left the chapel that the truly unforgettable moment happened. Outside, waiting on the dirt path, was a crowd. Not just the workers and neighbors who had come to the ceremony, but dozens of other people. Small farmers Robert had helped in hard times, workers he had treated with justice when other bosses exploited them, families he had fed in times of drought. And in front of everyone, to my absolute surprise, was the county judge, in a dark suit and tie. I know it sounds like a scene from a movie, my dears, but Robert had been fighting battles in courtrooms that we never saw. While we were sewing dresses and baking cakes, he was quietly ensuring that our happiness would be built on the solid ground of justice, not just hope. "Mr. Robert," he said, taking off his hat, "I came to bring news. Mr. Donald was arrested last night." A stunned silence took over everyone. "Arrested?" Robert asked incredulously. "Yes. After investigating your complaints, we discovered not only that he was involved in the attacks on your property, but also that he has been embezzling taxes for years, forging land documents, and extorting small farmers." The judge smiled. Frank, the foreman, confessed everything in exchange for a reduced sentence. He brought evidence, documents, names. "Mr. Donald will answer for many crimes. He will stay in prison for a long time." Just when we thought the shadow of Mr. Donald would hang over them forever, fate stepped in. It is a satisfying reminder that while evil may have its moment, truth eventually has the final say. Let's listen to how this beautiful journey concludes. Robert was so surprised he couldn't speak for a moment. It was Mama who broke the silence. "So, the persecution is over. The threats, everything is over. It's over, Mrs. Sarah," the judge confirmed. "You can live in peace now." Tears ran down Mama's face, but this time they were tears of relief, of liberation. Robert pulled her into a hug, and they stood there holding each other, while everyone around celebrated. Old Arthur started playing the banjo, a happy party song. Some men took women to dance right there in the yard. Molly danced in circles, twirling her dress. Caleb came to take me by the hand, and we danced together, laughing as we hadn't laughed in weeks. Lunch was served at tables set under the trees. Wild rice with mushrooms that perfumed the air, chicken pot pie, crispy stuffing, colorful garden salads. Mrs. Betty had made a simple coconut cake that melted in the mouth, decorated with edible flowers from the garden. We ate, laughed, sang. It was more than a wedding. It was a celebration of survival, of victory, of family. When the sun began to set, painting the sky pink and orange, Robert stood up and asked for silence. "I want to thank everyone who came here today, not just to celebrate my wedding, but to show that kindness exists, that community matters, that good always wins, even when it seems evil is winning." He looked at the three of us, me, Caleb, and Molly. "And I want to thank especially these 3 children who taught me to live again, who showed me that family isn't just blood, it's choice, it's love, it's staying when it gets hard." He extended his hand, and the 3 of us went to him. He hugged us along with Mama, all together, a united family finally. "Today, I didn't just gain a wife," he said. "I gained 3 children, and I promise before everyone here that I will love them, protect them, and care for them until my last day." And he kept that promise, my dears. Oh, how he kept it. The years that followed were the happiest of my life. My dears, the farm prospered under Robert's administration, who now had Caleb by his side. My brother grew strong and responsible, transforming into a man who made our stepfather overflow with pride. Molly bloomed like a well-tended flower. She grew up happy, helping Mrs. Betty in the kitchen, singing in the mornings. She kept no memory of the father who abandoned us and considered Robert her true father. And I continued living happily among the books of the vast library. Robert kept his promise to give me an education with all dedication. I became a teacher, teaching children to love words. Mama and Robert had 2 more children in the following years, a boy and a girl, who grew up surrounded by love and security. The house that was once silent as a cemetery lived full of voices, laughter, running children. But it wasn't only happiness. It would be a lie to say that. There were challenges, as there are in every life. There were bad harvests, illnesses, difficult moments. Old Arthur passed away a few years after the wedding, and we mourned his departure as one loses a dear grandfather. Mrs. Betty also left us when she was very old, sleeping peacefully on a Sunday afternoon. However, we faced everything together as a family. Mr. Donald never bothered us again. He got out of prison years later, already old and broken, and went to live with distant relatives in another region. We heard he died alone and bitter, with no one to cry for him. I felt no joy in that, only sadness for a life wasted in malice. Robert lived until completing his days in a golden autumn, surrounded by children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. In the end, he was on the porch of the big house, sitting in the rocking chair, with Mama by his side, holding his hand. He looked at her and said, "Sarah, you saved my life that stormy night." And Mama replied, crying, "And you saved mine." He closed his eyes and departed in peace with a smile on his face. He was buried next to Margaret and Emma because Mama insisted it was right. "They are part of his story," she said, "and I have no jealousy of a love that came before. I have gratitude for having shaped the man who learned to love." Mama lived a few more years after him, strong and dignified until the end. She spent her last days telling stories to her grandchildren, teaching them about courage, about dignity, about never giving up, even when everything seems lost. On the day she departed, she called the 3 of us, me, Caleb, and Molly, and said, "My children, I want you to remember one thing. That man who abandoned us didn't define our destiny. He just led us to the right path, and the storm that seemed like destruction was, in truth, salvation." Take a moment and think about your own storms. Is there a difficulty you are facing right now that might actually be a hidden door to a new beginning? Type, "I believe" in the comments if you are ready to walk through your gate. Those were her last words, and what wisdom was in them. Now, sitting on the very rocking chair where Father Robert used to sit, watching my great-grandchildren playing on the lush green grass, I finally understand the full meaning of the word family. You know, my dears, the biological father who abandoned us never returned, and I no longer bother looking for him. As for Mr. Donald, that greedy and cruel landlord, he passed away in a dilapidated nursing home, lonely and without a single relative by his side. That is the justice of fate. Robert and Mama taught me the greatest lesson of my life. Family isn't about those who share the same blood, but about those who decide to stay. When the storm hits, Robert chose us, and we chose him. That is the most sacred bond of all. If today you are feeling lonely, or carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders like my mother once did, please do not give up. Believe that somewhere out there, a gate is waiting to be opened, and a warm home is waiting to welcome you. If my family's story has brought you a glimmer of hope, please give me a like and share it with other resilient women. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit that little bell so we can meet again in the next stories. Thank you for listening, and may peace be with your home.